Great. Our next keynote is Yvonne Wakefield. Yvonne, you can jump on now if you like. We're so excited to have Yvonne here. She's one of our absolute favorite long-term partners that we've been working with for a good while. Yvonne is the founder of Caveat Legal. It's one of the most forward-thinking legal firms in the world. And yeah, she's going to be sharing how she managed to be basically a decade ahead of her industry in terms of strategy when this new normal hit us. Yvonne, we're excited to learn from you and to hear what thoughts you have for us today. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Lo, and thanks to all of you. Nice to see you all. I'm going to work on the basis that you can all hear me and see me. Somebody stop me if there's something wrong. So I've been asked to speak to you today about strategy and specifically the innovation in our business model that has put us so far ahead of our industry. Caveat, the business that I run is effectively a law firm, nothing sexy about that. So why would we be asked to speak about strategy and innovation? Basically, because we're not only perfectly placed for today's business environment, but we have also had absolutely zero negative impact from COVID. In fact, we're seeing absolutely unprecedented growth of over 65% on last year. So let's take a few steps back. Caveat is a panel of about 55 former big firm lawyers, grown up in the big firms, who are now working independently on our panel, and who consult to businesses, corporates, and other law firms. We do all types of commercial legal work, so anything that's contractual, and we work primarily within the M&A space. So we deal with investors buying into businesses, selling businesses, founders getting and taking investors on board, and that kind of thing. Next year we'll turn 10. So we are different in two significant aspects. The first is that we're completely virtual. We don't have, and we have never had, central offices. And secondly, even though the business is quite big, we have basically no employees. We have one employee, and you're looking at her. So how did we get here? And what does it have to do with strategy? And what about that is relevant to you? Let's take a few steps back. Back in the day in designing the business, I looked first for the problems. So looking at the legal industry, the two problems that jumped out at me, the obvious one, I think, is cost. The cost of legal services is just way too high. It makes legal services completely exclusive, only servicing extremely big businesses, and basically no private individuals can afford really good lawyers. Why are the costs so high? The costs are so high because the overheads are so high. Why are the overheads so high? Well, for two reasons that I think are the main reasons. The first is that there are a lot of people involved traditionally in the offering of legal services. You have all of your lawyers, and then you have all of the support staff. You have typists and secretaries and messengers and a whole bunch of support staff that are supporting the lawyers. All of these guys are employed on a permanent basis, which makes them a fixed cost to the business. The second major overhead, obviously, is the buildings. Whenever you drive around Sandton or you drive around Cape Town CBD, you see that the fanciest buildings around you are the law firms. Those businesses have to be paid for, and they're paid for by the clients. Traditionally, the fancy buildings were necessary to kind of instill confidence in clients. But I sort of believed that as technology was changing the world, that clients would start to realize that they're actually paying for the buildings and they don't want to pay for those buildings. And then the second big problem with the legal industry is that the lawyers are unhappy. You know, you try and do really well at school to get into law school, then you try and do really well in law school to get into the big firms, and then you go into the big firms, and before you know it, you know, you're actually chasing budgets and chasing targets for other people, and you're not actually helping people. And most people get into law because they want to help people. So you've got high overheads and you've got unhappy lawyers. Then before building anything, I asked people in business, other entrepreneurs, what the biggest headaches are that they face. And the two things that kept on rising to the surface were cash flow, just the difficulties in getting cash consistently into the business. And secondly, people, HR issues. Now, I found this quite interesting because I think a lot of entrepreneurs are genuinely kind of gregarious and they're good people. But it's that actually that makes the people side of things so hard, because when you are hiring people, you have to pay them when they're on holiday, you have to pay them when they're not working at capacity, you have to pay them during the quiet times, you have to train them, you have to performance manage them if they're not doing well. And then if you try to kind of get rid of them, there's such a long process that it's almost impossible. All of this takes time and it takes money, but more importantly, it takes energy. And it can be an absolute energy drain for any entrepreneur. So those are the two big business issues that I picked up that I thought needed to try and be sort of sidestepped and managed in relation to this new business. So then I built from the bottom up, asking how I could solve these problems in the most simple way. We need good lawyers. So we find the best lawyers available in the country, but we use them on the basis that they only work on contract for us, as and when we need them. They're only paid when they work, and they only get paid once we've been paid by the client. We need accounting and finance help. We need design and marketing help, web development and other support. And we do that on a similar basis. We don't hire people on a fixed and permanent basis to do that. We find the best people out there and we contract them to help us with their skills as and when we need them. This way, we're creating work for people, but we're not responsible for their careers and all of their income in the long term. Buildings and offices are not necessary for lawyers to do their jobs in today's world, so we don't have any, period. This way, with a focus on simplicity, we keep our responsibilities very, very light. So here, just kind of stepping out of this, I just want to speak a little bit about choosing to go with simplicity, and just say a couple of things around simplicity. Firstly, when you're building something, there's a kind of tension between simplicity and your own ego. Why? In the past, the signs of success of a business were what your head count is. How many people do you hire? Where are your offices? How big are your offices? How often do you travel for work? Where do you stay when you travel? All of those things were the kinds of signs that people on the outside would look at to see how successful you are. But most of this is actually strictly not necessary to getting the job done and to making money. Secondly, sometimes we feel that to be clever, something has to be complex. And that simple means that it's nothing special and that anyone can do it. This is not true. Sometimes the cleverest things are right in front of us and they are dead simple. When you scale, your business becomes more complex. And as it becomes more complex, it becomes exponentially more difficult to scale further. So eventually the complexity of the business bogs the whole thing down. I'm not sure if you've heard of the complexity multiple, but essentially it is, it's a kind of sum that you can do that takes the number of people that you employ, the number of products or services that you offer, the number of locations that you have offices at, and you do a sum with those. And essentially, the more of those moving parts you have, the higher your complexity multiple and the harder it will be for your business to scale. So the secret here is to start simple, and as you scale, to try and keep your business as simple as possible. And in that way, the complexity, the inevitable complexity, is delayed to a stage when your business is mature enough and financially sound enough to manage that complexity. In this way, we built a business model for legal services which is fit for purpose and very, very light. The innovation is actually in the business model. It's deceptively simple, but it works magnificently. Down the line, I can say that the business is growing really nicely. We reached our first strategic goals, we reset them, we reached those, we reset them again. But most importantly now in the scaling phase, we've broken our current strategy into an execution plan, which breaks our 5-year strategy into years. It breaks each year into quarters, Dana, similar to your 90-day plan. And then it breaks the quarters into months. Then it allocates tasks to different role players in the business and allows for consistent tracking and scoring against our goals. Your strategy can't be devised and then put into a drawer somewhere and left alone. It needs to be worked into every single aspect of the business, and then it needs to be diligently tracked against to make sure that we're going to meet each of the smaller parts that make up the bigger goal. Goals can only be met with diligent and ongoing implementation in line with strategy. Yeah, that's all from me. Good luck to all of you, and I'm available for questions.
Hey, Lau here, one of the founders of Outsource CFO. If you enjoyed this video, make it official. Click subscribe.